Hello, 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 and welcome to our newest episode of Pop Culture Therapy. I'm Cruellica Kain.
And I'm Nebula.
And today we are going to talk about American cartoons that have had way too many seasons, and some of which have overstayed their welcome.
And some have just gone past their prime.
That's a very kind way of saying it, too. So, we could easily talk about the first one on our list, and we'd probably be able to do an entire episode on that one alone. However, I want to start off with some other shows that I think need to be highlighted before we go to the series du jour. First one I want to talk about, because we actually were just discussing this a few moments ago offline, is South Park. In South Park, I was in high school when this show started. I was in my sophomore year of high school, and this is in the 90s, when this show began.
1997 and still going strong.
Oh yeah, I was a junior, not a sophomore. But still, that's a long-ass time ago. And so, it's evolved so much. The art style has stayed consistent, but its narrative has evolved.
Its narrative now is they try to just focus on either going for a straight season-long plotline, or they end up going, okay, we're going to take topics that are currently relevant in the political zeitgeist and make fun of them. That's basically been probably the jour for, last 7 or 8 seasons?
It has been.
And they only produce 10 episodes now a season.
Well, and the question of it is, and I think this is a question of any series for long-run American cartoons. I know Japan has a ton of cartoons that...
The UK has had some that have gone forever.
Absolutely. So, there's other countries that have their own, but the one thing about American television, at least in my opinion, is we have so much production. We are a television nation. Even if we're not sitting here watching television every instant of the day, we have it on our devices. Like, I've listened to television shows while I'm working sometimes.
Yeah, ever since the advent of streaming, we basically can't get away from it nowadays.
Absolutely. So there's so much out there that a series that has been around since the 90s, while it still hits many topics that are relevant, the question is always, should it be this long? Should it be 23 years old and counting about a group of 4 boys?
4 boys that are still in elementary school.
Well, and...
Yeah. But on the flip side, though, I do think they should have stuck with and kept going with the video games, because we don't know if they're going to, but the first 2 video games they put out, since it was the ones just done by creators Matt Stone and Trey Parker with The Stick of Truth and The Fractured But Whole, those are good games.
Absolutely. They're fantastic games. They're well thought out. They are well put together. And they're engaging. So even fans of South Park will really enjoy it. And people who don't know much about South Park can still enjoy it because it has RPG, action RPG, JRPG. They have all these random elements mixed into it.
And they pretty much kept the stories in the games all self-contained, but if you're a true fan of the show, you're going to appreciate it for all the references.
Absolutely. And so I do agree with that. Look at a different medium if possible. And we actually have one television show on here that I'm going to reference that has done that numerous times. So the next show, I think... Well, actually, what show would you like to reference?
I'd go with one that... I don't know how it's still going. It moved from Fox to TBS. I didn't know it was still going until I actually was on Netflix. Wait, there's more seasons? American Dad is one I'm like, how is it
still...
It's still on TBS. So another season just came out. And I think that's one that I'm like, how is that still going? And I'll lump Family Guy with it there as well, since they're both Seth MacFarlane shows.
Yes, and I think the problem with Family Guy is that was one of the proof in the pudding second chance series because it started in 1999, got canceled not too long after.
Ran on Adult Swim for a few years, along with Futurama, which got revived and actually had an ending.
Mm-hmm.
But Family Guy gets revived back by Fox and has been going strong for another, 17 years.
Yeah, if you think about it, it ran from 99 to 2003, got canceled, then got renewed because the syndication. So, one thing in America, I don't know what other countries do, because I don't want to comment on that because I'm not familiar, but within America, syndication is what makes or breaks a television show. If it does not have replay value, it will not stay. And a great example of that is Seinfeld for live action. Seinfeld has been in syndication for
ever since its
20 years.
Yeah, ever since its final episode aired, it's been in constant syndication on multiple networks.
And with that syndication, it stayed positive, it stayed relevant, and it stayed connected. And it's quite old. Same thing with, if you reference other live action series, Friends, Sex and the City. Those are syndication ratings gold. And so when Family Guy got canceled, it was due to poor ratings. And then when it went into syndication because nobody cared anymore, that's why it got renewed. And now it's just going.
And going.
And American Dad, the first few seasons were absolutely hilarious. And then the same thing happened with that. It lost its point because it felt like the show was just continuing because people loved it. And not because of any other value.
And American Dad, I ended up just popping on to see what some of the shows have become like since it was the TBS. They've gotten way darker. And it's basically become the Roger and Steve show.
Well, yes. Now, another show that lost me, but I personally think it went on too long. Others may disagree, is Adventure Time.
Which wrapped up last year.
2 years ago.
Oh, it was 2 years ago?
Yeah.
God, it's been that long?
Yep. And it ran, and it was 10 seasons. So, let me just start this. 10 seasons, 283 episodes. That is insane for a 10-season series. Especially nowadays, where most seasons are usually running about 25 to 30 episodes a season max. And that's pushing it. More often than not, most seasons are usually 10 to 13 episodes.
And the creator of Adventure Time ended up getting his new project, which is an adult series, which will go straight to HBO Max.
And I find it fascinating because it's one of those things of, did it overstay its welcome, or was it just long enough to capture the zeitgeist and capture it for that moment in time? Nobody talks about it anymore. The moment it ended, I have not heard anyone reference anything about Adventure Time.
And it's probably half of it has to do with the fact Cartoon Network didn't put it in the syndication. It's going straight to HBO, so we'll have to wait a couple of years and see what the HBO streaming, how it holds up.
It will be very curious to see that, because that's another thing about overstaying your welcome for any kind of cartoon series. Are you overstaying your welcome to the point where nobody cares anymore? Or have you overstayed your welcome so long that once you do end, everybody walks away and it's not of importance? Because there are a few series that have done that. One series that I think of occasionally is Rugrats. I loved Rugrats as a kid.
Nobody talks about it anymore.
Unless you're of that era.
Yeah. Where Rocko's Modern Life, which ran alongside of it, people still talk about it.
Well, same thing with Ren and Stimpy.
Yeah.
Those are shows that they did not overstay their welcome. they were for... No, the revival of Ren and Stimpy, that should have never occurred. That was a dumpster fire.
But the revival of Rocko's Modern Life in the movie actually felt like a modern continuation.
Now, we had talked about this before as well. You'd mentioned Archer.
Archer, which is going into its 11th season. I don't know how. After season 5, it felt like a significant drop-off in the content.
Well, and that's a hard thing to deal with as well.
Yeah.
Is when you do have a series that overstays its welcome, how do you feel then? Because Archer, its first 6-7 seasons were gold.
And I want to say maybe it was because the same writing staff that works on Archer, a lot of them work on Bob's Burgers as well, and it seems like when Archer's quality started to go down is when Bob Burger's quality started to go up.
Well, yeah, I do see that happening. One series I want to reference that I don't feel like it's overstayed its welcome, but it's impressive its longevity. And that's actually the Looney Tunes cartoons. 40 years. If you just take the core Looney Tunes, not their... But one thing that helped them is their offshoots.
Yeah, and the fact that they're in their 40th anniversary, but they haven't...
Oh, no, 40 seasons.
Yeah,
it's
40,
beyond 40 years.
40 years, yeah. But they've taken so many breaks that in those times, when they haven't had new cartoons produced, and especially after Mel Blanc died, they didn't produce any Looney Tunes for about 12 years, I think it was.
They took a pretty good break.
Because they needed to find the right voice actors, because Mel Blanc did about half the cast, so they had to find the perfect voices of new talent to fit in.
It's actually quite hilarious. If you ever listen to any of the classic radio shows that Mel Blanc appeared in, his radio voice is Bugs Bunny.
Makes sense.
It's so hilarious because every time I hear him, I'm like, that's Mel Blanc, because it's Bugs Bunny.
But they've been able to stay relevant, and then they're getting their new show coming on the streaming, which will aim for an all-ages group again. And I think that's one thing that's helped it. It has comedy that both children and adults can appreciate.
And another thing that Looney Tunes has done, primarily Bugs Bunny, because Bugs Bunny is the poster child for everything Looney Tunes, but you've had so many classic characters. You've had movies, you've had video games, you've had also offshoot cartoons, like Tiny Toons Adventures, I think is really what helped, because while I always loved Looney Tunes, it was Tiny Toons that kept me still engaged in it.
And the smart thing that show did, it was in the down period when there were no real Looney Tunes cartoons being produced outside of the stuff for movies. So it kept it relevant. And then in the early 2000s, the Looney Tunes show actually came back in a full syndicated show again.
It did. And the one thing that I think that's helped keep Looney Tunes where it's never truly felt like it's overstayed its welcome is because it wasn't afraid of trying new things. And while I'm not eager to have Looney Tunes with Elmer Fudd not having his rifle or Yosemite Sam not having his pistols, I'm willing to give it a shot because that's the one thing that's always made me engaged in Looney Tunes is the fact that it's not been just the same thing over and over again. Like my favorite Looney Tunes cartoons, admittedly, are the ones that talk about the world of the future. And these are in like the 60s and 70s. And they talk about the most ridiculous things that we know now have never come to pass. But it's so amazing to see how, like, inspired these animators and creators were.
I will put another one in there, too, that's done the same thing as Looney Tunes. And they come back, it seems like whenever they feel like it's the right time. And the Tom and Jerry shorts are another one that does the exact same thing as Looney Tunes.
Absolutely.
They've never really overstayed their welcome because they figured out when it's the right time for them and when it's not.
Yes. Now, I will admit, looking at both cartoon series with 2020 glasses, I could finally say 2020 vision because we're in that year, even though it's the crappiest year ever. many of the older cartoons, if you look at it from a modern perspective, I'm thinking the ones from the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, more so. There are elements of racism. There are elements of sexism. There are elements of violence.
Should we bring up what Silvercool had us watch from the 80s?
Yeah. No, it's... And so I can appreciate how modern audiences would feel uncomfortable seeing some of the old versions. But at the same time, the world was different. I'm not going to excuse it, but the world was different. If you look in World War II era propaganda cartoons from Japan, oh, holy hell, we're monsters in the universe. We're bigger than Godzilla as Americans.
Yeah, you can just go anywhere and look at anything that was produced during that era.
Well,
from any country.
Well, including the U.S. We were terrible with it.
Hey, you just have to go look at the propaganda that Disney produced during World War II if you really want to look at
Disney, Warner, everyone. Yeah. Everyone was guilty of propaganda. And so I understand why they're changing. Do I agree with their justification of throwing out the old? No, because the only way to change the future is to learn from our past.
That's why I appreciated that Blu-ray set with the Looney Tunes that I actually brought up. Hey, this is the era, we know these are controversial, but we're going to keep these as preserved as we can.
Well, that's exactly it. Preserve history. Like, okay, statues are a different thing, so if anybody says, well, getting rid of statues is a good thing. Yes, getting rid of Confederate statues, if you lost, you don't need your statues up there anymore. That's kind of rude.
Yeah.
But for pop culture in general, and I know we're talking about cartoons, but comic books are the same way. Because the Jonah Hex comic has a whole big page that says these comics were written for a not World War II, for a Civil War environment.
Yeah.
So elements in these comics are not going to seem appropriate for this generation. And so I can appreciate that, but don't get rid of it. And I will say that's the only element of Looney Tunes and Tom and Jerry that could potentially be considered overstaying their welcome.
Now let's get into the elephant in the room we haven't talked about.
The big elephant. Yeah. The 32 season.
Now renewed for 34 seasons.
The series that the voice actors, if you listen to episode 1 versus episode whatever number we're at, especially for Marge, she sounds like her mother that she voiced in the episode 1. It's kind of funny listening to episode 1 of her mom and listening to this episode, or listening to current episodes with her. It's like, wow. Because she's in her 70s.
Yeah, and
so the series we're talking about, if you don't know and you've lived under a rock since 1989 when this series first appeared, obviously if you're not old enough, it's been around no matter what year you were born, and that is The Simpsons.
Yeah. Which Kaiju has made the comment, which I'm starting to agree with him, until one of the main 4 voice actors perishes, the show's going to keep going.
Oh, absolutely. They're going to. So this is a series that I believe is the penultimate vision of overstaying your welcome. The writing staff, from research that Kaiju has done, is that this is the same writing staff that has been around for like the last 15 years.
Yes.
And so you don't have a lot of diversity with the writing staff. You don't have a lot of diversity with their storytelling. And it almost feels like with some of the episodes from a recent season that we've looked at, is they're actually replaying elements from years ago. Or retconning their own.
And you can tell Matt Groening has nothing to do with the show at this point because he's so focused on working on Enchanted over on Netflix now.
Oh, I know that series. I haven't watched it because it just doesn't interest me. I guess I'm like a little afraid of anything that remotely looks like Simpsons artwork. I remember when Simpsons first appeared on Tracy Ullman's show. Yes, I'm that old. I know. But watching the Tracy Ullman show, watching the Simpsons shorts, and then watching the Simpsons cartoon when it aired, and this was truly, for the modern age, the first adult cartoon.
The Flintstones may be the first syndicated cartoon on primetime television.
Yes.
But The Simpsons is the first one that was mainly directed at adults.
It was. And because the Flintstones, which was a series that ran for, I think, 9 seasons, and that's the core series, obviously. There was a ton of offshoots, ton of movies. Flintstones, if you have not heard of them, go look them up, because they're well worth it. I love the Flintstones. But nevertheless, the Flintstones was what broke the ground for saying in America that cartoons can be for adults too. Because it was one of the first cartoon series as well that had a pregnant individual.
Yep, and it was one of the first shows to actually talk about infidelity in a cartoon form as well.
So, Flintstones, and truthfully, The Simpsons has made reference to that in its earlier seasons, paying homage to Flintstones, Jetsons.
And Family Guy did the exact same thing.
Absolutely, because if it wasn't for them, these shows wouldn't exist to the popularity that they have. The problem with The Simpsons is I don't think anyone has ever told them enough is enough, because their ratings were so good for so many years, and they're now part of the cultural narrative, even if nobody likes them anymore, that they're always around.
Yeah. And then even the newer episodes still perform well in syndication, and we were getting back to that. How well does a show perform in syndication? Well, even the terrible modern seasons still do good in syndication, whether it be on FXX or on Fox itself.
Well, and one thing that FXX does is, because it's more than 600 episodes now, I think it's closer to 700 or so, is they will play the entirety of the series through 3 to 4 days straight around the holiday season. Just the entirety of the series. And it's massive, because anytime you flip on the station, you're going to get a random episode. And while I love The Simpsons for what it's meant, it really does prove that you can make yourself the joke that you were joking about in your first seasons. Because so Simpsons has always been a tongue-in-cheek series.
Yep.
And it made jokes about other series that did run too long. Other series that did take themselves too seriously. Other series that have done multiple other things. The Simpsons was known for flipping it on its head. And now The Simpsons is the joke that they made fun of.
Yep. And it's kind of amazing that this is the series that broke the streak that Bonanza had as the longest running TV show.
I know, it was amazing.
And Bonanza is kind of, they call Bonanza the TV series that killed the American Western. Mm-hmm. What's The Simpsons going to do when it finally goes off the air?
Well, and I will say there is some fear, because as a culture, we have certain things that we rely on. And it's not just the American culture, it's everywhere. So if we look at Japan, 2 of the largest well-known series, even in the States, that people know about is Doraemon and Detective Conan, or Case Closed in the U.S. Both of those series have been around for decades. I would say
Detective Conan started in the early 90s. Doraemon started in the 70s.
I was going to say, so you have series just as long, if not longer, than our longest running cartoon series. And this is not including Looney Tunes. And there's other series, like we talked about with the UK. I imagine every country has that one cartoon series that's been on for damn near forever. And the fear, I think, for any culture is when you lose that series, you're losing a piece of yourself. So I imagine that's one of the reasons why it is still around because it's the face of something. It is the representation of the local culture. A good, bad, or otherwise, it is a part of who we are as a nation. And yeah, people can hate it, but we've had presidents reference it. We've had it in so much controversy. We still have it in controversy, even though people are still watching it. But people can't let it go, and I think that's the reason why it's overstaying its welcome.
Yeah, it will have a point where it's going to end, because Disney's not going to keep it up forever now that they own it.
Well, I was kind of hoping, and I know this is disrespectful to all the hard work of the people who work on the show, but I was kind of hoping the moment that Disney got it, that they'd say, okay, this is the cutoff point because we can see ratings are diminishing. The only fear I have is ratings are probably doing so well, even on their streaming service, that what are you going to do? You have a cash cow.
Yeah. And they have it renewed up through season 34. You just don't know what's going to happen now at this point. And it's going to be interesting because with everything that's going on with COVID, you can probably experience delays with it as well, like we're seeing with a lot of TV shows. So
absolutely,
we'll have to see what the response on that, I think, before we'll see anything.
But the lesson I want to come away with, at least for myself, is that for all newer shows, don't look at The Simpsons or South Park as your guiding light of saying, this is how long you can be around forever. Because, truthfully, even with Family Guy, they got incredibly lucky. They got in at a good time when there wasn't competition. Like South Park, the reason why South Park, I feel, did so well, yes, George Clooney really helped motivate it. There's a whole story, if you ever get to look at the George Clooney story of how he got South Park on television, it's hilarious. But South Park came on at a great time because Beavis and Butthead, Daria, they were diminishing.
And they were both those shows were at their end point too.
And then you had King of the Hill, which was going to regular television syndication. So there was a market for cable television.
Yeah.
And that's where South Park really just popped in at the right time, on the right channel, and everything. And really for Simpsons, it was truly that. Because the artwork on the Tracy Ullman show was terrible. But there was just something so charming that it hit at that right moment where there was a lull.
Yeah. Not every series that's animated can be like King of the Hill, which stayed the perfect length.
And had an excellent story from start to finish.
And it actually had a conclusive story ending.
It did! Hank Hill is like an animated version of America's Dad.
Yeah.
Where Tom Hanks in real life is America's Dad. Hank Hill was the animated version.
Yeah. So with that, we have had a great time talking about this, but we're going to hit forward our next episode going back to a heavier topic again.
Yeah, because we're lame like that. But we enjoy you coming back for more each time. And please let us know what series you think overstayed its welcome.
I can think of plenty more. But on the flip side as well, what series do you think actually ended at the right time? Like King of the Hill, which actually is probably the best example of a show that ran the perfect length and ended at the right time.
There are so many shows out there. There are certain times where I think Daria could have stayed longer, but I think it ended right where it should have.
Yeah.
But with that, we'll see you again soon. Bye!